Hi everyone. So my name is Vanessa Paz, and the organism I picked today was Coffee arabica. And today we're going to be looking at the medicinal benefits and behaviors that Coffee arabica has on us people. So join me today, November 20th, 2020. So what's coffee arabica anyways? So coffee arabica is probably the coffee you drink every morning and you don't even know about it. So it makes up for about 60% of coffee in the US. And according to a secondary article published by the Journal of Natural Pharmaceuticals, coffee is the most frequently consumed functional food around the globe, so not even just in the US. The average consumption of coffee per person for a capital in the US is about so each person consumes about 4.4 kilograms of coffee, which turns out to be around $167.71 per person. So 52% of adults in the US say that they drink coffee. So you can imagine the huge market that this is. So it's in the Plantae kingdom, and it's in the Rubiaceae species. The reason that it's in the Rubiaceae species is because Coffee arabica flowers in families, as shown in the picture below. So Coffee arabica is considered a fruit, but they start in these flowers and they turn into these little red balls that are called cherries. So these Coffee arabica plants can grow into shrubs that can reach about 6 to 15 meters tall, and some plants even reach about 25 years in age if they are cared for correctly. So Coffee arabica uh, originates from Ethiopia. So in this slide, we are introduced to the Coffee arabica plant. And what you can expect to see here is you have some basic anatomy like the roots, the trunk, the branches that are all connected to the leaves and that are connected to the shoots that provide a home for the flowers that we just discussed. So I'd like to draw your attention to the lower part of the chart where what I discussed to be cherries are. So the anatomy of this cherry goes in order of skin, which is the red part that we see. Next comes the mucilage, which is the part that acts as a shell. Next is the parchment, which is the covering that protects the seed and contains the embryo of Coffee arabica. And now I'd like to show you the top right, which is the flower. So the flowering of coffee occurs when the plant is in full blossom and then after it turns into these little cool cherries. So Coffee arabica also grows best in a hot climate with rich soil and an abundant rainfall, which makes me think back to its home of Ethiopia. However, it's funny because Coffee arabica actually needs shade to grow. Here, I want to introduce you to some of the medicinal advantages that Coffee arabica has on us humans. So first, we're going to start off with asthma and bronchitis. So coffee is used to treat bronchitis and asthma because it has the same benefit of protecting your airway because it has something called xanthine. This is what's used in most asthma medications. With cardiovascular disease, studies have shown how patients who have had 2 doses of about 250 milligrams of coffee showed lower risk in their cardiovascular health than people who did not. So those who drink coffee showed a higher capacity of concentration because of increased levels of caffeine release and adrenaline. So adrenaline will sharpen your decision making. So dealing with cognition and mood. So anyone who's drinking coffee has known that it comes with a certain promise of taking you to the bathroom even when you don't want to. So basically, how this benefits you in your gastrointestinal health and your liver health is that coffee is a laxative and it helps you maintain normal bowel movement, which is shown to be super beneficial in protecting your liver health. And lastly, our main focus for tonight, the benefits of coffee against diabetes. So according to an article by Shadra Bish, So it was published in the Journal of Natural Pharmaceuticals, and it's a primary article. So 7% of the population suffers from diabetes. So one of the biggest spikes in diabetes was seen in 1990 to 1993, where cases of diabetes increased 33% in those 9 years compared to other years. So I'd like to introduce you to a study that was completed by Wafa A. Mergelin, and it was published in the Journal of Diabetes Research, and it is a primary article. So the study consisted of giving 48 rats who had type 2 diabetes 50 milligram and 100 milligram doses of coffee arabica for 28 days. So I also like to add that they gave these rats diabetes, and they gave them diets of like high sugar and fat, which I thought was personally interesting to read about, because the first question I had when I thought about reading this article was, how do rats get diabetes? So to lessen the effect of diabetes too, you have to lessen the risk factors that make you vulnerable to it. So the main goal of this study was to get factors like hyperglycemia levels, plasma levels, and glucose levels under control. So even in the first 8 days that this study happened, two of the groups two of the groups of rats had already seen significant changes in glucose levels. So these two groups were given the highest doses of coffee arabica, and it was about 100 milligrams, and about a drop of 71% was seen in glucose levels compared to the controlled group of mice, which only a 56% reduction of glucose levels was shown. So earlier in my presentation, I brought up all these other diseases because I wanted to show how coffee arabica lessens the risks that can lead to bigger problems, and it's a superfood that fights back. In the next article, I present a primary article study conducted by Dr. Paul Smith, and this was a blind study published in the Journal of Diabetes Care, that is a part of the American Diabetes Association. So this study consisted of 12 healthy individuals, and it asked where plasma levels were. So those who drank caffeinated coffee arabica showed lower plasma glucose levels by 50%, versus those who were given the placebo. So this is relative to the idea that coffee arabica reduced plasma glucose levels. So plasma glucose levels contributes to glucose sensitivity, and glucose sensitivity is what diabetes 2 is. So the body is requiring smaller amounts of insulin, and both studies deal with the diabetes 2. So I'd also like to bring up in the figure below that this shows a pictorial representation. So cells in the body are not able to respond to insulin as they normally would in someone who does not have diabetes. So this causes blood sugar to rise, and it's almost deathly to the person who has diabetes, which is why in these studies, both studies, the one I mentioned before, they wanted to keep blood sugar levels down in the rats with type 2 diabetes. And of course, with supply comes demand. So during this presentation, we've established that a big part of the population are coffee drinkers worldwide. And coffee arabica being the most common species to get coffee from, which was 60%. So there is some supply and demand that goes into coffee production that is not all peaches and cream. So about 25 million farmers grow coffee arabica in 60 different countries. 70% of global production comes from these small farmers who own less than 50 acres of land. So for my final article, we go back to the roots of coffee arabica, where a bigger demand for coffee does not mean a better quality of coffee. So we need more coffee. This also means farmers have to provide more. So this article published by L. G. Hart in the Journal of Environmental Management takes place in 20 different coffee farms in Ethiopia, and it aims to show how the supply and demand of coffee and how it hurts quality. So farmers in this article had to remove shade that helped their coffee arabica plants show to make room for more coffee arabica plants, which we discussed before is not good. They need shade to grow despite all the water and sun that they get. So the overexposure of sun makes the coffee arabica bean ripen so much faster, and it doesn't reach its full potential as a bean. So coffee has to go through this test called SCAA, Specialty Coffee Status, before it's put into production for consumption. So all the 20 farmers here that were tested did not pass the SCAA specialty coffee test. So they could not be put out into production because it was not considered up to standard. So we can conclude that while we are finding new ways to use coffee because of the beneficial factors, we are not producing the best quality in coffee. So, to conclude it all, we've established together how coffee plants work as a whole in their anatomy. We've established how coffee arabica has medicinal benefits, specifically focused on factors that help with diabetes too and other diseases. And lastly, how coffee is hurting farmers and their livelihood because they're not able to keep up with the supply and demand or pass coffee tests that hurt their livelihood and credibility. So, so these are all the references I used in my presentation, and I would like to thank you for joining me about this talk of coffee arabica, and I hope it was interesting to you. So goodbye.